intact and every year I've enjoyed one every.
Out Fiddler. Puts on the step, goes right through, puts on the step again. Oh, goes Freddie. That was magnificent stuff. Well, they shall not weary them. Parcels gets away, Parcels still going. Mullins opens up again. Oh, look at him go. He beats O'Davis on the outside.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of The Voluntary Tackle, the only NRL podcast demanding a statue of Ben Custo be constructed in Islamabad. No real reason, just think it'll be a good tourist attraction one day once all the sectarian violence has subsided. I'm your host, Aimon Brown, and today on the show we're discussing all the late-breaking news in the wonderful world of rugby league. But first, I'm joined in the Media Watch Mario studios by the only man who hates KFC so much he once tracked down the granddaughter of the Colonel just so he could stuff her mouth with a fresh radish. It's Xander Risotto. Welcome to the show, mate.
How did you know I hate KFC that much, mate? It actually is incredibly accurate. I have a quite irrational disdain for all things fast food and KFC.
Well, mate, I'm obviously aware very good friends off mic.
That is true.
I know your aversion to fast food.
Was it all those
well.
times that I threatened to firebomb the local KFC?
Stuffing a radish into someone's mouth, regardless of it being a benevolent intention, that's still oral rape in most US states, I think, mate.
Is it?
I think so, because you still need consent.
I mean, it just depends, right? I mean, as far as I understand it, I'd still be a shot at a Supreme Court position, judging on the current administration.
I think that's a prerequisite, isn't it? The listeners probably know this already, but Xander Risotto he's very much, his body is a temple. I think, do you still bathe 3 or 4 times a day in olive oil?
No, it's mother's milk, mate.
Okay.
Yeah, like from the Game of Thrones, mother's milk. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So not milk from your mother's memories.
No.
Okay,
because that sort of that holy priestess memory.
So you're sort of drizzling yourself in a lactating memory of a regal princess.
That's right, something like that.
Yeah, okay.
Like I like to use the regal stuff. Yeah.
Are you one of those health freaks that don't really go near a lot of dairy as well? Do you go for all the alternative milks like almond milk, soy milk?
No.
There's macadamia milk now.
Almonds don't have tits, mate. So don't go for that.
There you go. Put that in your fucking book, Descartes. You need a philosophical quote. Almonds don't have tits. That's said here on the potty today. Voluntary tackle. You can't get it anywhere else, folks. I don't know if you know this, but obviously the Colonel, as in the Colonel Sanders, he often gets impugned as a racist, but there's certainly no proof of it. I mean, I know he looks like
not the white
one.
outfit and the KKK connections.
Well, so I think the KKK thing is fabricated, but certainly the white outfits would make you seem like a white supremacist, wouldn't it? I mean, that's just not good for optics. But did you know why he wore the white suits?
No.
It's because he was dabbling in floured chicken all the time, and he didn't want his black suits to look like he had some kind of dandruff issue. So
is that right?
So he changed from black suits to white suits.
I do remember reading, actually, that the Colonel sold the idea and actually didn't make a ton off it. Like he
franchised. Or
yeah, like that he, when it became a corporate thing, like he was literally just some, southern bloke who liked a lot of chicken. And that, he didn't. He actually didn't make too much money off the whole thing. Like he actually,
really,
he made it all right at the end of his life, but otherwise lived pretty destitute.
You make bad decisions. The Titans know about it. They signed Ash Taylor.
Although that's not looking as bad currently.
It's actually starting to bear fruit. It's been a long time. Not sure if he's worth $1 million a year, but we'll get into it. Now, we should mention before we kick into the show, Xander, that the world recently recognised the International Day of Remembrance of the Slave Trade and its abolishment. So to mark the moment this week, I actually abducted a middle-aged white man of privilege, and I've been kicking the shit out of him ever since. How have you been marking the day?
Not by doing that.
I'm just doing my bit, mate.
Yeah, no, mate. I just watched the replay of the Roosters thumping the Broncos again, to be honest. It's how I celebrated it.
Okay.
I just felt like that, taking off the shackles of the Roosters' attack is how I looked at it.
I'm sure the oppressed African Americans would appreciate that obscure metaphor. Now, before we pretend to have a major family issue and breach our contracts just to earn more money, just a reminder, you can follow the show on social media via the handle @VoluntaryTackle, but be warned, we're mainly on Twitter. You can also follow Xander Risotto on the handle @Xander_TVT for all of your nefarious KFC needs. But, mate, looking to push in. We don't really have anything scripted for this show, but that's the voluntary tackles way. So there's a lot to talk about since the last time we were here. I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the last episode. So we do apologise to our loyal listeners for the semi-hiatus. Just so you know, Xander and I were called away. We had higher duties. The Victorian government actually asked us to fornicate with returning travellers in the Stanford Hotel down in Victoria. Again, just doing our bit. But we want to talk about Cameron Smith, Xander, on the show today because it almost looks set in stone, doesn't it? Doesn't look like he's going to be at Melbourne next year, all because of Brandon Smith, who sort of delivered an ultimatum to the club and said, well, if Cameron plays on, I'm gone. So it looks as though he's either going to retire or he could have another swan song year with another club. I have some views on this, but we're going to start with you. What should Cameron Smith do, in your opinion?
In terms of what he should do, I think if he physically could play on, I think he actually could do a lot of good at a club like the Titans. Where he'd go in there, he'd raise their standards. He'd be going into a system that Holbrook has actually been, improving quite a bit, and finish off his career by helping build something new. Yeah. I know there's a lot of romance about being a one-club player and all the rest of it, but I don't think anyone in Melbourne would begrudge him for that.
I used to think that, but then Cooper Cronk came along, and I think it added to the romance. In fact, I know that because if he was around, I probably would fornicate with him.
Well, that's just right. I mean, Cronk's legacy is unimpeachable now. Like he played in 4 grand finals in a row and won the last 3.
It's not a bad effort, is it?
It's pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah. I think at this stage, you just simply cannot question that.
Is it a case here where Cameron Smith wants to sort of crawl out of the shadow here of Cooper Cronk because he saw Cooper do it? And is there a part of him who might think, well, if Cooper can do it, maybe I can go to another club and excel and get a GF as well? Is that something that might be in his mind?
I think that'd probably be a motivating force for him to retire early because I suspect that he will want as few comparisons with himself and Cooper Cronk as possible.
I'll tell you what, if he went to the Gold Coast Titans, for example, and in 2021 got a premiership, that's like the Mighty Ducks 4, isn't it? I mean, that's a fucking rags to riches tale. That would be worthy of a movie.
It would actually. It would be incredibly impressive. I mean,
who would play Cameron in the movie? Danny DeVito for me.
Who's incredibly hairy and has a bum chin that isn't Boyd Corden? I'm just trying to think.
That's really interesting.
As an actor,
I can think of Craig McLaughlin's ass.
I actually reckon maybe Al Pacino with that age reversing technology they used in The Irishman. I could just see him yelling at the ref in like a key scene in a movie. Just be really funny instead of Cameron Smith like in his polite tones and charming, Eugene. Just all of a sudden it would just get into this yell of them where you're like, "What are you talking about?"
Have you ever noticed Al Pacino yells in every movie he's in?
Yeah.
Liar, pants on fire.
There's a scene in every movie. You're right.
Yeah, they find a way for it to be there. Look, going back to our original thing here, Cameron Smith. Is there any incentive for him to retire? Is there the proverbial risk that by playing on he could potentially tarnish his legacy? Because at the moment in the game, he's virtually on a level all to himself. He's all but guaranteed to be an immortal one day. He's achieved everything in the game to a high level of success. If he went on and played an extra year at a club, say the Titans, and had a flop, would that affect the legacy of Cameron Smith?
The guy's too much of a professional. The only way you could see it happening was, if he went out and had a year like Darius Boyd, like when
wait, years like Darius Boyd.
Exactly. Boyd has been awful for a while now, but like even if he put in a year like Boyd has had this year, his legacy is still confirmed. You know what I mean? Like it's beyond doubt that he's going to be an immortal, and unless he was absolutely phoning it in and made the Titans worse by his presence. I mean, and it's just inconceivable to me that he would be.
Well, it looks like there's only really 2 prospects from what we're reading. It's either Cameron Smith going to the Brisbane Broncos or going to the Gold Coast Titans. Given those 2 options, would there be a preference, in your opinion, a preference of where he should go? Because I'm assuming it's not the Broncos because they are an absolute basket case, and if we're talking about legacy destruction, I think going to the Broncos might be one way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a certain level of romance both ways, but I think the Titans kind of, I know the Broncos are in an awful place right now, but I think the Titans need him more. There's there's more, I think, for the game to gain for him from him going there than the Broncos, which, fundamentally is still an incredibly strong franchise. It just needs to get its, proverbial shit together.
Well, it was an incredibly strong franchise. I feel like at the moment, if you went to the Broncos, it'd be like signing up to work at Big W. I mean, it's a real fall from grace.
It is, but I mean, you look at the amount of talent they've got on the sidelines, the amount of players that have been out injured. They still have a pretty good roster, and they still started the season on fire. They just need a bit of a bit more direction. I mean, I've been reading reports coming out about the way things kind of unraveled this season, and just the contrast between Seibold's tenure at Souths and him trying to take the game plan. And it did sound like during his tenure, he probably brought a little bit too much of a corporate attitude to the coaching of the team. There's a lot of grumblings about excessive numbers of meetings with management and coaches, like an over analysis of things. So the players ended up just getting bamboozled, almost like they were being coached by an NFL coach. And that's not how you coach rugby league.
I actually heard Darius Boyd was put in charge of taking the minutes for those meetings, and he fucked that up too.
Drop the pen.
Yeah, dropping the pen and writing in a different language. At one point, he was typing it up in wingdings. What a fuckwit. But look, Cameron Smith, we're talking about him going to another club here. What is the attributes that a Cameron Smith would bring to say, let's go with the Gold Coast Titans example, because I think that is the most likely scenario if he was to play on next year. I mean, is it a case of him coming in and actually having a bigger role than just playing hooker? It's obviously it's his influence and it's his aura, but is there a chance he probably would go to a club like that and he also brings some kind of coaching acumen to some degree?
Well, yeah, absolutely, right. And we talked about this with Cooper Cronk, like some of the things that he brought to the Roosters. Just little pieces around, thinking through more aspects of the game. Like we talked about that Storm game early last year where they did the feint to Cooper Cronk and ended up going to Latrell Mitchell for the field goal that won that game, and those things kind of being things that he brought from the Storm. I think he would bring that level of incisiveness and detail to thinking through game plans, but he'd also bring professionalism, and he would also take pressure off the halves, right? So you've still got a relatively young halves combination there.
Who are actually playing quite well at the moment.
They are, right?
I mean, young Fogarty is doing pretty well. By the way, if you spelt Fogarty, surely you go with Fogarty and not Fogarty. I mean, that's an unusual pronunciation. I don't want to get bogged down in this, but his family's fucked up there, let's be honest. Right. But you're right. So he would take pressure off what is a young halves pairing, because Ash Taylor, we think of him as established, but he copped that $1 million contract very early on in his career.
He did.
Because the Gold Coast Titans sort of tend to throw a lot of money at you, even at the embryo stage of your life, as is the management
got good
strategy.
genes, mate. Just throw a $10 million contract at him.
We've signed up the twinkle in a milkman's eye for $10 million a year next year. So, yeah, there's been some mistakes made at the club, obviously. But you're saying that he would sort of come in and play that sort of mentor role for the halves.
You can see how that worked, with Cronk, the Roosters as well. Like, Kiri was always a great playmaker, but it just allowed him space and also the rest of the team as well, like just having that composure. You could see it in games when you're in those sort of championship minutes, the impact of a Cronk having on that team. And we've kind of lacked that a little bit in the back end of some of the big games this year. And you can kind of see that. So I think that's the other thing is you win more of those close games and you've got somebody who's been there and done that.
Yeah.
And he would absolutely bring that maturity to the Titans.
What would it be like, though, when he's playing the Storm? That'd be the unusual scenario, wouldn't it? Just, he would have absolutely all the knowledge on, Craig Bellamy's game plan and vice versa.
That's right. So, which is, kind of what happened with the 2018 Grand Final.
That's right. Yeah, very true. Look, there's also talk, Xander, of Cameron Smith going across as a package deal with Bellyache.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any credence to that? Is that a likely thing to happen? I know Bellamy's been pretty vocal about saying, I don't want to coach on. I'm not particularly interested in going to another club, although then he tends to sign on the dotted line. Imagine the coup of getting Craig Bellamy and Cameron Smith to go to your club.
Yeah, I don't think Bellamy'd go up with him.
Well, they've just re-signed Holbrook, so that's sort of the Titans. That would put a red pen through them, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's not going to happen. The biggest contender for Bellyache has been the touted next Brisbane franchise, right? They want to bring him on, even if it's just as a sort of a manager role, like Phil Gould is going to take over at the Warriors.
Yep. I was listening to the Front Office podcast, and they had the franchise manager of the Brisbane Firehawks, which is one of the bids for the second Brisbane team, and he was basically straight out and said, yes, if the opportunity comes along, we are going to pursue Cameron Smith and we are going to pursue Craig Bellamy. So we know for a fact if they are the successful bidder, that they'd be very much in the equation. So there could be an eventuality where a second team in Brisbane comes in and the foundations are Cameron Smith and Craig Bellamy.
Yeah, mind you, you're looking at 2022 and that'd be a coaching duo for sure. Then he's not playing at that point.
Cameron Smith?
Yeah, you'd have to assume.
Mate, he could play on until he's 40, I think.
I mean, he would cement himself. If he was continuing to play, honestly, it would be Tom Brady-like stuff, right?
Honestly, just based on what we've seen, why would he hang up the boots? It's not as though his game is faded
He's still
that much.
playing incredibly well.
Yeah, I mean, he lost his speed 5 years ago,
Yeah.
right? So he hasn't played with leg speed for a while, but he's played with a lot of mental speed, and that's what he'd be bringing.
His vision is impeccable in terms of where he's able to spot space and create opportunities for his side. He's kicking, like we just saw in the game against Manly, he created a lot. He did drop a couple balls uncharacteristically, but that was still his kicking game basically kept the pressure on.
Look, his vision's very good, but he did miss a trick when he couldn't spot all of those extra noughts on his bank account a few years ago. More after this. Welcome back to the voluntary tackle. Anthony Seibold, Xander, he's gone. It happened days ago. This isn't late breaking news, but we very rarely have our fingers on the collective pulse anyway, so doesn't really need to be said. But like a sunburnt man in his 50s on the prowl for a 21-year-old at the Coogee Bay Hotel, we could all see for a while that Anthony was going to be leaving his duties at the Broncos empty-handed, Xander, and possibly slapped with some kind of felony by the end of the time. I guess this sacking seems a bit like tender mercy to me, and I think it seemed like a tender mercy to a lot of other people, especially when one of the major stakeholders compares you to a cancerous tumour.
That was a bit rough.
A little bit rough. Maybe we'll start with that. I thought that was absolutely outrageous for a major stakeholder of a rugby league club to say that about the coach. How did you see those comments in particular?
It was, I mean, it's hard to take it too many different ways. I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Geez, that's a hard thing to do.
I did think he was broadly talking about the situation, like...
I meant stage 3 cancer, not terminal.
But you know what I mean? Like, it's an awful analogy, but he was basically saying, listen, I think a smarter analogy would be, look, this is like a relationship that's not working. He didn't have to go terminal patient that's dying.
No.
Like it was just so...
Is there a way that he could have gone further beyond the pale? Is there some kind of metaphor he could have drawn that would have been even worse?
Nazis.
Okay, well, we do that all the time on the show.
It didn't actually come across the way it was said as it had a lot of ill intent specifically for Seibold. It was just a really clumsy metaphor for an arrangement that wasn't working.
Clumsy metaphor? He called him a tumour. He called him a cancer.
He didn't call him a tuner. Didn't call him a tuner either, but he didn't call him a tumour. It's not a tumour. But
he called him a cancerous growth, didn't he?
But he basically said, look, this situation has gone on, and he said it's like when you've got a cancerous tumour. If you don't cut it out, the patient dies, and we don't want the patient to die.
I see. And the patient being here, the Brisbane Broncos franchise.
And so, I mean, by extension, yes, it does make it sound like he's calling Seibold a tumour.
Does that make Kevin Walters chemo?
If it does, he's still in danger of killing the patient.
That means he's
just
going to
putting
come
it out
along
there.
And I assume Darius Boyd is a spread of the cancer. So Kevin Walters' chemo would come along and just carpet bomb the whole club, kill every cell.
That's right. But I think. I mean,
it's a shit metaphor when it comes to rugby league.
Pretty
You should
awful.
never have mentioned it.
Yeah.
We probably should just touch on this. It's not new news, but the sacking, or we can call it sacking inverted commas. I think he jumped slightly before he was pushed.
The exit deal.
Is this the right move for him? Or should he have tried to fight his way through this?
No, they paid him $1 million to get out of a contract that was, he was. I think he could have pushed for another 2 point whatever it was that was left on it, but I think for his own sake, the amount of shit that happened up there, like, and we sort of talked about it on previous podcasts, the kinds of rumors that were being spread, and and we said that at the time that this just cannot be true, and subsequently it's come out that now these people have been tracked down, and we heard over the last couple of days that those names have now been divulged to Seibold's legal team, and they've handed them to the NRL Integrity Unit, and apparently they include New South Wales-based identities that are associated with rugby league. They didn't say specifically what their association is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's obviously some people with agendas who are pretty nasty, and for his own sake, it's probably best that he's gone.
And look, we can't speculate, obviously, for legal and libel reasons, but it does actually surprise me that it's New South Wales based. I had the feeling that it was probably coming from identities, inverted commas, up there in Brisbane who didn't like to see their beloved club treated the way it was being treated.
Well, to be fair, there are a few Queensland, former sort of Queensland old boys who are based down in Sydney, work for Fox Sports, for example.
Would you still call them New South Wales?
Well, they said New South Wales based.
Yeah, fair enough.
They didn't say they were New South Wales people.
Yeah. Well, one thing about Anthony Seibold that we do know is he has been someone that's ruffled a lot of feathers during his meteoric rise through the coaching ranks. He's extremely ambitious and seemed to have a very clear path about what he wanted for his career progression. And perhaps he didn't care about exactly who he had to climb over to get there. Now, that's unbridled ambition. There's not necessarily anything intrinsically wrong with that.
He gained the role at the Broncos, and the exit of Bennett was assured. It was a very weird process, but it didn't seem to me at the time like this was something that he'd orchestrated through some Machiavellian plot. It just sounded like the board were over Bennett for whatever reason, and were keen to bring in somebody new.
But he was doing well at Souths.
He was, and the point has been made that at Souths he had a core group of senior players and a good mix in that roster of up and comers that were able to kind of help him institute the style of play he wanted.
I got to say, I mean, obviously when he first took over the South Sydney club, I think he was the Coach of the Year in his first year.
He got the Dally M Coach of the Year award in 2018.
And they did very well.
The Roosters won, but
but
and got the minor premiership.
It did appear as though I still haven't left with the impression that he's some incredible tactician, even at South. So I remember thinking that at one point, as you said, he had a bit of an up-tempo style, particularly on his left edge there, where they'd run through the hands, and they had a lot of success with almost a singular play.
Yeah.
But then in the back half of the season, I think most clubs got wise to that. And it didn't look as though he pivoted too much when it came to the offensive strategy. So I do wonder if there's a bit of a misnomer there with him having this amazing offensive up-tempo strategy, and especially in light of what we've seen at the Broncos.
I think it's hard to say. I'm sure he'll improve. He'll probably go to England. I don't know what he'll do. He'll go and continue coaching. You have to think.
Well, there's a word today that he's potentially going down to the Newcastle Knights in an assistant role.
Is that right?
He's big mates with Adam O'Brien.
Yeah, right. Well, they both coached under Seibold. I mean, under Bellamy.
Under Bellamy at Melbourne, exactly. So I think that's where their friendship started, and they're still pretty tight. So it looks as though that might be the next ship. It
probably wouldn't hurt him to go and play second fiddle somewhere again. Maybe he was just too young.
Yeah.
I mean, not everyone can be Trent Robinson and coach premierships in your late 30s.
We probably should talk about the Brisbane Broncos club as well, Xander, outside of Anthony Seibold, because they've been left coachless. They've got this guy called something Gentle in there, which is quite an ironic name when you consider the level of viciousness that exists within the Brisbane. Yeah, exactly. Actually, it's very fitting for Darius Boyd's defensive style. But we should probably talk about who the main candidates are to take over that job. It looks as though it's a tussle between Kevin Walters and Paul Green. Paul Kent reported today that Paul Green might be edging ahead in that contest. What are your thoughts on who should take over the role there? You've got Kevin Walters, who's an untested first-grade coach, and you've got premiership-winning coach Paul Green, who has had a pretty lean last couple of years at the Cowboys. Who would you prefer to take on?
So it's a tricky one between those two, right? Because, Green, as everyone has correctly stated, he has taken a side to a premiership. So, arguably he does know how to do it. But he had Jonathan Thurston in that side. And, when you've got one of the sort of great halfbacks of all time, does make your life a little bit easier.
Do you think if Paul hadn't said to Jonathan Thurston, this season, mate, can you just carve? That he wouldn't have carved? Do you reckon he needed that kind of little coach whisper in the ear to say, look, can you just be an immortal and we're going to do well?
Yeah, I think those players, you don't so much coach them as you manage them, because, I mean, like the Andrew Johns types of players, you listen to them talk about the way they grew up with the game. They're all just so obsessed with their own, practicing the art of a creative half. That, you don't really want to get in their way. You just want to make sure they remain motivated.
Yep. No, fair call. Obviously, Andrew John's highly motivated by stimulant drugs like ecstasy, which made him
Allegedly.
Allegedly. I think he admitted that one, didn't he?
Well, he did actually. That's right. But I did hear him on Immortal Behaviour recently, saying that he barely drinks at all anymore, and he's been a good boy, and that he doesn't dish out life advice.
Well, can I say this? I love Joey. I think he's a tremendously positive and unique personality in the game, and is, I think, in my opinion, the best player I've ever seen play. So it's certainly no knock on him, but there were some dalliances there with recreational drugs, and who knows? It might have been the 0-1 grand final at that up-tempo speed. It might have been the E that got him there. Welcome back to the voluntary tackle. Tavita Pangai Jr. has not been a name highly revered this year, Xander. Marred in controversy whether it's turning up to a bikies barbershop barbecue. But he also had an interview during the week with the board. At the moment, as far as I'm aware, by the time of this record, the Brisbane Broncos board haven't made a decision, a formal one, on whether or not to tear up his contract. I've seen him conduct a couple of interviews with the media, Xander. My impression is this is someone that is not great at putting his case forward, at least not appearing to be a dickhead. It doesn't seem very sincere, never seems to be in the wrong. This is my impression of Tavita Pangai Jr., but what's your take?
So you're talking about the famous James Hooper interview, are you?
Yes, I am.
Jesus, that was...
Wasn't that a fucking calamity?
Oh,
it's that and Prince Andrew for me.
I mean... No, he definitely handled himself better than Prince Andrew.
Although, remember when he said, I couldn't have been at that barber shop because I was at a pizza shop in Woking? That was a fucking weird moment in the Pangai interview.
The funniest part for me was when Hooper's gone, so you've done this before, how many times? Like, oh, yeah, a lot of times, done it before, I've told the integrity unit. Then you're like, that's not good.
No, but there's almost this kind of weird, unrepentant attitude, though, as though...
It's very flippant.
He doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, he comes across as not particularly... he's not really taking this all that seriously. And he's come in to sort of manage the PR on this thing. But what's interesting, I don't know if you've seen it, is that apparently the word coming out is that he sat down with his legal team and the Broncos and apparently put his case forward, and it's looking like they're going to go back on their decision to tear his contract up, and he's going to stay at the Broncos now.
And so that's not been confirmed, though, has it?
Hasn't been confirmed, but that's apparently...
Is that where it's leaning?
Yeah, that's apparently the board have been turned.
Really?
So I don't know what he said.
Maybe I'd say they've been turned on a legal premise and not like an emotional one, because you'd want to get as far away from that fucker as you possibly could.
Supposedly they do have it in their power to like dock his pay significantly, so they may take up that option to ram the point home. But apparently he's he's put forward a case for why he should stay, and they've apparently acceded to that to a certain degree, but they may well still hit him with a big stick. And if you never know, maybe it'll be good for him if they can use those clauses in his contract to cut his pay in half. Then you'd think that'd probably straighten him up a little bit.
Jesus, mate, the way he's played, I would get the scissors and cut his penis in half. I mean, he's fucked that club up massively over the last 12 months. Well, maybe not. Maybe thirds, to be the way he's played.
Mate, once the tip's gone, it doesn't matter.
Depends. Make some kind of weird, like, Feng-Wei shape out of the penis. Look, that's a bit absurd, but... Look, I think that the club...
Puppetry of the penis. Sorry, go on. Turn it into a sock puppet.
Why not? I do think that there's really only one decision to be made. I think he has been a really corrosive influence at the club. I think there's probably a lot more going on at Brisbane that we don't know and that can't be voiced publicly. But I think that he has just been someone who not only himself has been in breach of certain expectations, behavioural expectations at the club, but I think he also has exercised an influence over a number of other people as well, because when he has been caught in breach, he's not always been alone.
No, that's right. And there was that suggestion. There was a couple of reports out earlier that he was hanging over he'd hung over the Broncos' head that there were third-party deals that were off the books or something like that.
That's right. Yeah.
Apparently, that's all nonsense, and that actually what happened was that there were third-party deals that were registered, but the companies got cold feet because of all the crap that he got into.
I mean, even the fact that Pangai Jr. is willing to go there to essentially use this as leverage for his own advantage, I think it says a lot about his character, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's not something that would be attractive. And I thought Robbo was quite right when he came out and he said that's not the kind of character you want at a in a successful culture.
I assume playing the pokies until 3 a.m. before a finals match isn't a part of that picture?
Not ideal, no.
But look, and another thing that really got me about Pangai Jr. was the fact that in these negotiations where they were talking about his COVID breaches, he actually said, look, I can't guarantee I'm not going to keep doing it. Isn't that an odd thing to volunteer? He goes, I know I've breached it. I know it's wrong. And I think I'm probably going to keep doing it. It's fucking mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's not something. I mean, if you're looking for another contract, then it's not really the kind of message you want to be promoting.
Yeah. And look, you've made this point before, and I think it's quite an accurate one, is off-field issues aside, he also hasn't brought his A game on the field, has he?
No.
I know that the guy actually oozes a lot of natural talent. I think he's a firebrand forward who, if he had a different personality, could be really effective and be a wonderful asset. But at the moment, even on the field, he takes that aggression outside of the rule book too often. It gives away a myriad of penalties, and he also can be quite soft in D.
Yeah, there's a touch of the Joey Leilua about him, isn't there? Like he just really bad judgment, has a tendency to just lose concentration, it seems. He doesn't put those efforts on in defence, you're right.
Puts the fear of God in a KFC drive-through.
Welcome back to the Voluntary Tackle. This is Xander Risotto. I'm bringing us back here because this week Aimon hasn't done his research, so I'm bringing in the run sheet. And Aimon, we did have an interesting story pop in the last couple of weeks. A top story or a story with a lot of topping. The Super League is taken some innovative approaches to sponsorship this season. Don't know if you saw, but Papa John's, apparently because, nobody's ordering in during COVID or something, they're short of a buck. They asked the Super League if they could come to a special arrangement. Instead of paying for sponsorship in dollars or in pounds, what are the point, they're paying in pizza.
Okay, so I did hear something about this story where essentially the Super League came out spruiking a new sponsorship deal.
That's right.
In a time of crisis. This Papa John's pizza chain that I'm not familiar with. Great name, by the way. I'd love to meet Papa John. I'm sure he has anchovy breath. But the big sort of spoiling point of it was the fact that the sponsorship deal is officially worth nothing.
They are getting their brand at the games, and instead of paying for it in dollars, they are literally just giving the players free pizza.
Free pizza.
What does that? I mean, what if the players are lactose intolerant or celiac, for example?
Yeah, I assume they have a Papa John would have a gluten-free variant.
Gluten-free, dairy-free variant with no cheese.
But I don't
so
even
just
think
basically meat on a biscuit, a gluten-free biscuit in a box.
We know the Super League's in deep financial shit. Can pizza be used as a currency? Can they actually trade with other organisations? Could they list on the stock exchange with pizza, for example? I don't know if they can.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with the history of finance, Aimon.
Intimately.
But there was a reason we moved from a barter system, and one of those reasons was that crops go off. It's good to have a medium of exchange that doesn't actually get mouldy.
Yeah, I like
that. For a few weeks.
Although I got to say, especially because I keep a lot of my money in my socks when I go jogging, my notes do tend to go mouldy. But I take the point nonetheless. Look, I think this is almost a symptom, isn't it? It's the perfect analogy for just how much trouble the English Super League is in, that they're willing to be paid in pizza.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying for a long time that the Super League and the rugby football league more broadly in the UK is just a shambles. There was a lot of ink spilled about how poorly managed the Wolfpack was, and the mess that they ended up in. I know they're well down the pecking order over there. You've got soccer and as the big code.
Then croquet, polo, synchronised swimming.
That's right.
Ferret dancing, and then I think rugby league comes next.
Yeah, somewhere around there in rugby union. But but
it depends. Ferret dancing can sometimes be up the list.
That's right.
Depending if there's a particularly fertile ferret that season.
Yeah, I believe that's often the case too.
The bigger the erection, the better the dancing. I don't want to go into it, but that's basically how ferret dancing works.
But yeah, I mean, they're not a huge profile sport, but for years it sounded like they haven't been well managed.
Yeah.
Look,
the thing about this story that really does my head in the most, though, Xander, is the fact that they actually went out of their way to really promote this sponsorship deal as if it was something of value.
Yeah, I know.
If anything, it sort of like cemented the perception of how much shit they're in.
It's just embarrassing, right? Like, I mean, Jesus,
Free
pizza. It sounds like one of those things that, like literally it would have been the kind of thing you would expect from a sponsor back in 1908 when they just became professional, because that would have passed muster back then. You know, well, working people who had to keep a day job will give them free food.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's a kid's slumber party. I wonder if they're letting some of the guys in Wigan do a sleepover as well with some of the guys at St Helens. It's an unusual strategy, and I do wonder if there is some other kind of cost-cutting measures that the English Super League would have to undertake, because this tells me that they don't have a lot of English pounds lying around.
That's true.
What should they be doing there to save their skin? Can you foresee any major cost-cutting coming their way? I'm going to pitch my first one at you. Footballs can be quite expensive. Should they be using live hedgehogs? Because you can just steal them from the wild for free.
Somehow I imagine that's going to be worth more time and labour than buying a football, but yeah.
Do you know what I like the idea about that? And obviously all the RSPCA considerations aside here, but putting in, say, the short kick, if it's a live hedgehog, that's going to be a lot more challenging because it can actually get up and run. So say you dribble it into the in goal, and then it fucks off.
It'll improve the accuracy of kickers because they'll really have to keep their eye on the ball. That's right. One minor correction, I did say when the game went professional in 1908, that's obviously the Australian date. It was 1895 in England, just before any smart ass on Twitter corrects me.
And you are a stickler for detail.
That's
and what
right.
I really love about that is you've segued that into live hedgehog substituting for the steed and with something really accurate. More after this. Welcome back to the Voluntary Tackle. Look, stuff all the off-field stuff, Xander. I want to talk about some on-field stuff that's really concerning me as a Roosters fan, actually. It's been the subject of several of my nightmares over the last week, and it's the Penrith Panthers, because if you ask me, mate, they're playing too bloody well. I'm not happy about it. And my question to you is, can anyone stop the Penrith Panthers from winning the premiership in 2020? Because it looks pretty bloody ominous to me.
They're not losing the minor premiership at this point. No one's going to beat them, you would have to think. I mean, they're on 11 in a row. They've got the Broncos, Parramatta, North Queensland, and Canterbury as their final.
So they've got
games.
4 byes in a row. That's unusual, isn't it?
Like, because, you know, at this point, after watching them the last few weeks, I'd almost put a line through Parramatta. Even after that win against Melbourne, I thought, geez, like they fell over the line against a very average Melbourne side that was almost as down on troops as we were against Melbourne.
And you know, the real worry for the Eels was the fact that, you know, a lot of commentators were calling them out, going, "You've got a soft underbelly." And you think they won't have responded to that, but they really just rolled over like an 8-year-old girl.
It was fascinating for me. I remember because
I don't know what that means. I don't want that to sound really sus.
Wait a second. Did you just say rolled over like an underage girl?
Like an 8-year-old girl.
Oh, God. I didn't even twig to it. Jesus.
I shouldn't have called attention to it.
That's
to
right.
Because it's an unusual
in the Me
thing to
Too
say.
era, that's probably not the best comment to make.
I think that's very Jimmy Savile of me. I shouldn't have done that. Anyway, please proceed.
Very Catholic priest. I would say that at this point, it's hard to see them getting, like, you know, being a contender. Like, they've had the easiest run. They've been able to play it at home pretty well the entire season, the Eels. They've had a dream run with injuries. You know, now they've got Dylan Brown out, which is a huge out for them, right?
Yeah, they've lost Dylan Brown. And Reid Marnie's also out for a few weeks as well.
So it's going to be interesting because they were statistically, and this was pointed out by Sterlo, they had the best defence in the competition, but their right edge was the 6th best, and South's left edge attack was one of the most potent.
So
and they just
took them to the cleaners.
Yeah, I mean, it was early in the game. It was left edge, bam, 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 and they just kept falling for the exact same block play. It was just it was painful to watch, and then. You know, like, just to mix it up, South decided to start shifting it right, and they cut him up on the right too. It was just incredible.
Turns out that you can cut the Eels up anywhere, even up the guts if you want, or across Blake Ferguson's schnoz.
But, you know, more getting back to the central point, they're going to be an easy one for Penrith. I don't see them. I know they beat them last time, but I think Penrith are in too good a form. They played a fired-up Tigers without Kikau or Api Coruscant, and they still took them to the cleaners.
That's the really scary part. They were missing 2 key players, and they still looked very, very good. I've got a question for us, obviously holding ourselves to account. That's what we do here on the show, sort of every, I don't know, 2nd or 3rd show. Otherwise, we have carte blanche. But before the season kicked off, we actually put together a table, and I don't think either of us had the Penrith Panthers in our top 8.
No.
What is it about this team versus last year's team? Why have they advanced so far on what they were?
Well, I mean, I do think it's a breakout of a few young blokes, but I think it's also just their systems clicking into gear. Like, I mean, 2019, I think they came 10th.
Yeah.
So they weren't a terrible side. They were kind of on the cusp of the 8, but they brought in Zane Tedovano from the Roosters, who's obviously who's been around a successful system. But
he's not even like he's a good player, but he's like coming off the bench.
Oh yeah, no, he's been a great buy, but it's been more like the likes of Kikau, and I think Api Coruscant has probably been the buy of the season.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
He's just been carving, but again, like they didn't even need him. On the weekend. I mean, in their game against the Tigers. And I also just think that Cleary has taken his game to a whole new level. Like I remember reading about it in the off season that he'd tried to pack on a bit more muscle to deal with the fact that he wasn't able to play as direct and be as solid in defence.
Yeah.
And he's been much more imposing as a half this year.
I don't know. I saw a few TikTok videos. He's certainly been working out his pelvis at home.
That's right, mate. He's got great agility there.
Yeah, great core strength.
That's right.
I don't know how he's been building that up, but
bamboozles defence with those shifting hips. But the thing that really blew me away watching them play the Tigers is just they were ferocious in defence as well at the back end of the game. Like they really want this, and I think in terms of sheer hunger, don't think there's any other club in the comp right now that look like they want it as much. And I think there was a stat pulled out that they've won the minor premiership twice in 91 and 2003, and both times they won the comp.
Yeah, I know. There is certainly some ominous signs that 2020 could be their year. I just love the balance in this team. As you said, there's been some young guys come along that I don't think either of us had factored in. I'd never heard of Crichton before this year. I remember late last year being a fan of a guy called Naden, who's really come out of his shell. I do think the great teams always have two great centres. And those guys, I know they shift them around a little bit at the moment. I don't understand how Tyrone May's making that team, by the way. He could only be a blight on the way that they play. But if you've got Crichton and Naden at centre and the likes of To'o and Mansour on the wing, then you've got Staines, who's injured and has been blistering when he's been there. Edwards, I mean, it's the whole team in the back line is amazing. And then you've got this great forward pack firing.
They don't on paper at the start of the season, they didn't look like they had the strongest spine, but they've absolutely been killing it, right? And as you said, their centres, Crichton has been a revelation this year. I mean, he's amazing. He scores every week.
Yeah,
he's a bolter for Origin for sure. Right?
Anyone that likes a good anytime scorer multi, I've won 3 times this year off this combination: Kikau, Naden, Crichton. Link them up in 3 in a 3 anytime bet and enjoy the money. You're welcome.
The other one that surprised me is Dylan Edwards. Like I mean, he's been incredibly good at fullback. Like I'd never really rated him terribly up until this season, but
he lost a bit of confidence last year.
Yeah,
he has been a very good player, but then he had one game in particular where he made about 8 handling errors.
Yeah,
and it literally took him about a month or 2 to get his confidence back. And he has had a bit of injury this year. They've had that Aitken kid fill in for him. But when he's been there, Edwards has been exceptional, actually. I think he's got great evasiveness. If there's one little knock on him, it's probably maybe not as many try assists as some other fullbacks, but he's very evasive.
But he's been busy. I mean, and he's one of those fullbacks that isn't in the conversation in terms of best fullbacks in the game at all. But you just see him when he's out there for Penrith.
He's effective.
He's very effective, and you almost don't notice him because he never does anything wrong, right?
Is the old conventional wisdom here hold true, Xander, for you, that you need to have a loss to shake the monkey off the back? Since the comps resumed since lockdown, I think they've won all of their games, haven't they? Oh, no, they've lost one. They lost one to Parramatta.
Yeah, they lost that Parramatta
which
game.
Which they should have won.
They drew with Newcastle.
Yeah, and that's right. They had all their players out that day.
Yeah.
So with a full team, this team hasn't even really looked like losing, which is pretty scary. And there was a stat I think I'd heard late last week about the fact that they hadn't even been behind at half-time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They hadn't conceded the point in the first 20 minutes of a game for so many.
But when we know finals football is a different beast to regular competition games, there's a lot of young heads in this team. I'm wondering if the occasion might be the only thing that could sink them, because at the moment it's not talent.
It doesn't look like it right now. Like, I mean, you're right, and you see this, like, this has kind of been what's happened to the Storm in previous years is that they've statistically looked unbeatable like they did, last year. They were statistically the most dominant side, I think.
Although that
Dragons.
didn't feel like it. Did you feel the same way? It felt like that wasn't the case, even though it statistically was.
Yeah, I mean, they had that weird thing around their 7. They couldn't quite work it out, but they were still just so dominant that that you got the sense that if the Roosters didn't stop them, they'd have ground anyone else into the dirt.
If there were any teams that could stop the Penrith Panthers from taking it all the way this year, who are they?
It's the Roosters and Storm. I don't see anyone
Are there
else.
any other Smokies?
I mean,
Where do you see Canberra, for example?
I'm not entirely convinced. I think they've been playing pretty well. They've had a few dips in form here and there that sort of make me wonder where they are. I think Canberra at the moment, this will sound a bit weird, but I kind of feel like they're in a similar place to Souths, where when they're on, they do look like they can be title contenders. But there's just been a few lapses there that make me question them.
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone thought when Hodgson limped off, that was their season limping off. I was included in that. But since then, they've kind of learned how to win ugly. And I think in a weird way, the teams that know how to win ugly, i.e. not the Parramatta Eels, are the ones that shape up as potential premiership contenders. Because when it comes to finals games, as we know, they can become a grind. The tempo of the defence goes up, and it really comes down to the character of the team rather than sort of the flashiness or the brilliance of the outside backs, for example. And I think Canberra have sort of shown me that they are that team that can do that. They are a smoky for me. I think that South might have been shaping up as a smoky up until Latrell Mitchell's unfortunate injury. By the way, how did you see that? That was, as a former Rooster, Latrell Mitchell, I think I don't know, I don't want to speak for you in advance here, but I think we both sort of wanted to see him do well, even though he hasn't exactly always played his cards right since leaving the club. But it is a shame for the rugby league in general, the NRL public, I think, that he got injured, because in the last couple of weeks, it looked like for the first time he was finding his feet.
Oh, he's an electric player. I felt really bad for him when I heard he'd done it that bad. It looked kind of innocuous. It looked like he clutched it pretty bad, but the actual action, I thought, oh, surely he'll be right.
It was like an inverted splits.
Yeah, I mean, but you know what I mean? Like it looked like a tumble. You see it happen 9-10 times a game, players just rolling over each other, but he just got his leg in a slightly awkward position.
See it a lot at like strip clubs. It looked like he was doing a pole
Usually
dance
they
move.
have less clothes on, but
I'm glad he kept his shorts on.
But I felt really bad for him because you're right. Like he's had patchy form throughout the year, but he's in a lot of critical areas and line breaks and try assists. He's been right up there, and he had one of his best games positionally and defensively at fullback in that win over Parramatta. Like that moment where they'd caught him dead to rights in goal for a dropout, and he just burned them all.
Game. Yeah, it was an amazing run.
Yeah, and you just kind of thought, well, he's really getting the fullback role. Like he's still not as busy as the others, but he was doing those little areas, those little sort of effort areas that they talk about. He was getting them right. And yeah, it's a shame for the game. He
was really ramping up, and the one thing about a Wayne Bennett coach side is that he does tend to get them ramped up at the right time. And Latrell Mitchell very much looked like he was following the same arc. He was just finding his feet. I think we probably would have seen something pretty special come finals.
Yeah, and he was getting into that frame. He was playing. You could see if he kept it up, he was also going to be a certain to be somewhere in the Origin side as well. Like you couldn't see them not picking him the way he was playing.
It was so tough though, that Origin side, to be honest.
Well,
There's
I mean,
a million freaks in the outside backs now.
There is, but if you wanted to put him back at centre, I mean, he's there wouldn't be anyone else you'd want ahead of him right now.
I'd still maybe think Trebojevic and Whiten. Or maybe Katoni Staggs, although he missed a lot of.
I got to say, we said it when we were at the game, mate. I mean, Staggs, electric in attack.
He missed a lot of tackles, didn't he?
Yeah, like that channel down the left edge, Morris burned him over and over again.
That had me worried a little bit, actually, I have to admit. By the way, when we talk about the game, the listeners might not know this, we went out and watched the triumphant, very tight arm wrestling game with the Brisbane Broncos. What was the margin again? 58 points to 12 or something.
That's
like
right.
that.
Well, the margin was not 58.
Sorry, their margin would have been 46 points.
That's correct, yes.
But no, one thing I did want to mention is thanks again for the ticket, by the way. It was a great game to watch. When we were out there, I noticed you had very unusual socks on. And listeners, I'll paint the scene for you. We're out there. I've reached down for my VB, and as I reached down, I noticed some exposed sock area around Xander's ankles. That's where you generally wear your socks.
I sometimes wear them on my face.
Okay, well,
you can convert them into face masks.
Yeah, people sometimes when they masturbate wear them somewhere else as well for cleanup. But no, I noticed on your one, it had your wife's face on it.
That's right.
And so obviously I can't notice something like that and then not mention it. And so I said to you, is that your wife?
Yeah.
And you said, yes, they are. That is my wife.
So she got a custom pair of socks made, 2 pairs, one with her face looking... I don't know the expression I'd call it. She's
She
kind of
looked shocked.
calling out. It was from a photo where she's kind of calling out and ordering somebody about.
Okay, fair enough.
You know,
I guess it would depend if you stretch them up above, like towards your knee.
Yeah.
The facial expression would change.
it would change. It turned into one of pure horror.
Yeah.
For
Or
the
if you
person
squash
looking at
them
it.
down, you could make a grimace.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But she got them for me for a birthday one year, and they're just particularly comfortable socks.
This was the rationale you gave me, and I thought, well, I don't know, comfort or not. I'm not sure if you'd be wearing that out and about or not. I mean, do you wear them into the office?
Well, I don't go into the office anymore. I work from
that's
home,
right, you're
so
all
that
remote.
was the thing. That was part of the reason I forgot. Is I just had them on because they're very comfy to wear around the house, and I was just like, all of a sudden I thought, oh shit, I better head to the footy.
So good.
And just still had them on. It was funny actually. I took off my slippers at home, and I was about to put my shoes on. I'm like, well, I change it. I'm like, fuck it.
Yeah, I'll just leave them on. Why not?
You know.
As long as it stops at the socks, mate. It's not underpants or anything else, is it? So it's just at socks. Oh, okay, your silence is deafening. Look, we're going to... one last question here for you, mate, on the pod.
The undies are very comfortable as well.
Stop it. I want a prediction from you. If there's one thing that can stop the Penrith Panthers from winning the premiership, what is it?
I'm kind of reminded of that scene where Homer was asked to visualise how he was going to beat Drederick Tatum. But if our listeners are old enough to remember that scene, Google it. I think at this stage, it'll be one of two things. It will be the immaturity of their side not being able to handle finals pressure, which I'm still sceptical of, or it'll be injuries because they've had a dream run with injuries and. They haven't had to deal with too many major ones to date.
Okay, that's funny. For me, it's an angry German stabbing Nathan Cleary in the back like a Monica Seles incident. Well, it's that time of the show again for Media Watch Mario Madness. And we are striking him at the time of recording here on a Sunday evening, at, I guess, a time of mourning, because the mighty Eagles, have just been slayed by the Melbourne Storm. No shame in that. They've slayed many people. But he joins us now. Media Watch Mario, welcome to the Voluntary Tackle.
Thank you, boys. Pleasure to be on as usual. It's been a while.
Mate, I am interested in this. How do you drown your sorrows after a game like the one today, or even in the last couple of weeks? Obviously, it hasn't been the happiest time for the club. How does Media Watch Mario handle his sorrow about the club's performance?
Well, in true manly fashion, I beat up my wife and then go take a knife to a church and then just go nuts.
I see. Well, I thought, I don't know.
Is that every weekend, mate?
It's only when we lose, so yes, every weekend.
I was thinking more some Epsom salts and a hot bath, but that's okay. We all handle these things differently. Look, I'm going to throw a bit of a theory at you straight away, mate. I don't want to add insult to injury. I have a bit of a critique of someone that I love who plays for your club, but I just feel like he's having his first off-season ever. Can you predict who I'm about to say?
Probably Jake.
Yeah, Jakey Drabojevic. Look, it's not like he's playing poorly, mate. I'm not sure if you have the same opinions that I do, but I feel like this is the first season that I've seen him look a bit lethargic and sort of lacking a bit of dynamism. Would you agree with that, or am I completely off base?
No, you're probably right. And to be honest, can you blame him when you can see that your back line is amongst the worst ever assembled? It's got to be hard to put in that insane amount of effort like he does. When other people think they're putting in 100%, by Jake terms, they're putting in about 80.
Yeah.
Because that guy just puts in more effort than vast majority of people. But how can you keep doing that when you just see people just phoning it in, just being absolute scrubs all around you?
I guess that's the shocking thing for me, mate, is I think Jake Drabojevic is probably one of the most competitive guys I've seen ever pull on a jersey. And to see him out there having, I guess, a slight air of conceding that the club's not doing so well, because he just seems spewing after every loss normally. This is the first time I've seen him, I don't know, just have a little bit of an air of acceptance. But you think that that's probably more the team's fault than him?
Well, look, I'm not in any way trying to compare myself to Jake Turbo. He's better than me at absolutely everything that he's ever done and everything that I've ever done. I'm sure he's better than me. That being said, I like to think that when I used to play footy or soccer, I had a very similar style in that I would just be always going, and people would be going, Jesus Christ, will this idiot stop running? So that's about the only similarity I can make with myself. But I know that I'd play games sometimes where you'd just see that everyone was having an off game. And so I'd try a bit harder to try and rally them, and they'd just suck more, and then eventually my game would go to shit too. And I just feel like that's what's happening to Jake. It's taken longer for him than it did for me because, I was never very good. That's a pretty obvious difference.
Do you think he's getting sledged by Tom? Because Tom's there going, well, we had this argument over the last couple of seasons about who's the more effective Trbojevic. I think the proof might be in the pudding now that Tom's more important to the Eagles than Jake.
Yeah, but it's not much good being important to a team if you're, busy being dunked into a glass of milk because you are, in fact, a biscuit.
He does seem to have hamstrings made out of tissue paper, but I know, Xander, you had something to mention. I believe it might be about one Cade Cust.
Yeah, no, I just had a question for you, Murray. Do you think that he's growing into the role so far? Because I do think on the evidence of the last couple of weeks, he's beginning to take on a few Walker-like characteristics.
Ooh, that's harsh.
Look, my main complaint with Dylan Walker, apart from being a completely shit human, is the fact that he gets the ball and he's an instant handbrake with it. Cade Cust at least will move forward. He doesn't just crab across the field, then just stop, go back. Oh, wait, stop, go back again. Oh, shit, what do I do? Oh, I'll just fall down. So Cust, he'll just throw it into the side of DCE's head from a metre away. I mean, that was pretty funny for everyone, it must be said. He needs a kicking game. I'm certainly not saying that Cade Cust is a finished product. I just think that he shows the most promise of anyone we've had at 5'8", at least since Blake Green, and possibly longer. I still think he shows a lot of promise, but when the team is going poorly, he struggles to. He's not someone at this stage who's going to be lifting us.
Do you think he's probably just a bit? Is it an immaturity thing? Is he a bit too eager? I'd noticed a couple of times, as we said, Manly definitely played better against the Storm this week than they did, and compared to that shocker they had last week. But he was tried to be involved, but a few times there was one instance in particular where I thought. Cust actively bombed a try. I think it was going to Trbojevic through the middle. There seems to be a little bit of eagerness there, and it can be to his detriment, is my sense.
I think he can feel Dylan Walker's, whatever was injured getting better, and he knows that Des has his dick firmly shoved up Walker's ass and just wants him back there, and Cust is going.
What do you really think, mate?
Mario, is there a chance that Cade Cust isn't having the same level of success that people would anticipate because of his name, Cade Cust? Is that something that's holding him back? Because the only time I can see of anyone rebuking that is Cooper Cronk. When he first came on the scene ago, I remember thinking he won't be a success because his name's Cooper Cronk. Could Cade Cust be an example of someone that might be held back by that?
Well, look how everyone's wanking over Bradman Best.
That is a terrible name. I don't care what people say. I think it's an awful name.
It sounds like a made-up name, doesn't it?
It's an alias, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's an alias of a superhero.
Bradman Best.
He's another graduate of our all-time reigning Toyota Cup winning team, as is Cade Cust. So I won't actually hear a bad word about Bradman Best. Thank you,
mate. There was also a pretty horrendous injury at your club. Thompson had what looked to be some kind of serpent tongue. His tongue split in two.
Oh, that was awful.
He looked slightly mutated, like he'd sort of rolled himself in some kind of radioactive ooze. My question to you is, how do you recover from a ruptured tongue, and can it be bandaged?
I'm pretty well. Funny story. I remember my nephew when he was about 2 or 3 coming up to me and saying, "Uncle Andy, I bit my tongue. I need a Band-Aid." So I went and got him a Band-Aid and he stuck it on his tongue and then he said he felt better.
Okay, and I assume that didn't become a choking hazard?
Well, I don't think it stayed in there all that long, but I feel at least 10 minutes, and by then his tongue was magically fixed. The power of Band-Aid. It's like the power of magic water when someone gets injured.
Yeah, right. And Uncle Mario was never asked to babysit again, I'm betting. Brad Parker, mate, have you been impressed with him? I know he had a bit of a mid-season slump, but his effort level seems to be back there a little bit again. My only critique of Brad Parker, and I don't know if you feel the same way, Xander, is he looks a little bit like an extra in Braveheart. He looks decidedly English, like he's a guy who gets an arrow through the head in the opening scene. Again, I'm not sure if that's holding him back, Mario.
Well, in his case, and it's always a blunt arrow that hits him in the head because he just gets concussed, multiple times a year.
That's right. You don't want to kill Parker because he's good for sort of comic value. You want to just concuss him so he can return to the next scene.
It's been said on another podcast, but it's something that I've thought. I respect Brad Parker because that guy, he just squeezes every ounce of ability out of an utterly talentless body. There's very few people that try harder than him, but he's really, he's trying to be in a race with V8s, and he's got a little, Pee-wee 50 engine inside that bonnet. It's not really going to go far.
That's what I want on my epitaph, Mario. I played pretty well for a cockeyed dickhead. Look, we're going to go just beyond Manly very briefly, mate. There's a fair bit going on in the world of NRL, as there always is. I want to get your take on the ongoing Brisbane Broncos saga. Who should be the coach of the Brisbane Broncos post-Seabold?
Whoever keeps them down where they belong. So I'm Team Kevy.
So I assume you think that Kevy won't be the masterstroke that a lot of the Brisbane old boys thinks he would be.
No, I think Kevy will be... Kevy as a first-grade NRL coach will make 2020 Des Hasler look inspired.
Cameron Smith, there's rumours that he might play on next year, or at least that he will be making an announcement very soon. Do you think, in your opinion, he will retire or play on in 2021 for another club?
I think he has the biggest ego of any player to ever play the game, and he will play as long as someone's willing to put more money in his bank accounts.
You actually think he'll play on? So who is he going to play on for, do you think?
I think it will be Storm. I think the second Brisbane team, because they want him, but that's not till 2022. The current Brisbane team, certainly they could improve by having him. There's no question about that. But much like Greg Inglis did with Brisbane, lots of players pretend they want to go there, but who the hell would want to go there now? Smith has too much ego. He's too used to winning. There's no way he's going to go to a team that he knows is not making the finals next year. He's going to use them as a carrot to pull another 800 grand out of Storm next year.
Well, Mario, that wraps up another Media Watch Mario Madness. Thank you very much for joining the show again, and good luck with putting your nephew's tongue in more elastoplast.
Thanks, see ya.
Bye, mate. Thank you for listening to The Voluntary Tackle, the only NRL podcast prepared to palm off the big issues. The program would like to advise listeners that because its hosts have developed a gold Rolex shopping addiction, they need your help. Please make comments and ratings on Apple Podcasts, or alternatively, awkwardly shoehorn the show into conversations with friends and loved ones. You may also wish to follow the show across social media platforms. They include Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. The Voluntary Tackle is now also available on Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Thank you again for flying with the Voluntary Tackle. Your luggage is now our property, and you will not be seeing it again. In the event of a non-traditional landing, please assume the Russians had blown another plane from the sky, and feel free to panic.